Hi everyone, my name is Monique.
And I'm Naveen from Before You Play.
And welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Board Games, where we pretty much just discuss a few games that we've been playing and give some quick thoughts on them.
Yeah, we have 4 today. Monique has come up with a theme of this entire episode, I guess. These are unique-ish games.
They each have something that I felt was unique about them.
There you go.
It's not necessarily a unique theme, but there's something about the game that makes it different.
Okay.
So
Yes.
I always try to push for some sort of connecting thing. Doesn't always fit. At least Naveen thinks so. But
Yeah.
that's what we're going with today. But before we get into the games, we do have one thing that we'd like to talk about, and it is the Meeps. So if you didn't catch our video where we discussed this the first time, our partnership with the Meeps has come to an end. And so unfortunately, the entire store, the brand, the Meeps, is coming to a close. Mm-hmm. So we announced it in a previous video, and since then, a majority of our branded clothing, I guess, is now no longer available. But for anybody who is interested in specifically the crop tops, when we had mentioned it in the previous video, I think the whole item was accidentally deleted from the store.
Yeah.
So if anybody was looking for it, it might not have been there. Just so you know, they are still available, and the store will be closing completely on December 15th. And there are other designs, by the way, not just ours. So I'm actually wearing one right now. This is how to draw a meeple. I don't know what is still available, but we just want to let you know that the deadline is December 15th. All right, shall we talk about some games?
Yes, you have the first one.
Okay, now we do need to mention that all of the games that we'll be talking about today were sent to us by the publishers as review copies. Okay, so the first game that we'll be discussing is actually both the base game as well as its expansion, and it is called Canvas and Reflections.
Canvas Reflections, yes. So this is a 1 to 5 player game that plays in roughly 30 minutes. It's a family weight kind of game where you're basically going to be trying to put together 3 unique paintings. This game kind of has a unique thing where this is why it's unique,
Yes.
is because there are transparency cards that have different art on them. And over the course of the game, you're going to try to collect 3 different transparencies per painting, so that you can score some of the public objectives that are out there.
Yes, at the end of the game, each player will have their own 3 separate paintings, and they'll all look unique because they're basically just different combinations of combining and overlaying these transparencies. Gameplay-wise, the game is actually very simple, very straightforward. Each player has these tokens called inspiration tokens that serve as sort of the currency in the game. And on your turn, you're either taking one of these transparencies or you're completing a painting. When you take the transparencies, it's one of those games where the further out you choose to take, you have to place out one of your inspiration tokens on the previous ones in the line. And this is going to be dependent on whether or not you have the expansion, because one comes with, I believe, a mat and the other one a board. And as soon as you're ready to complete a painting, then you'll combine 3 of these transparencies from your hand, and you'll earn ribbons for each of the public objectives, depending on how well you did. And at the end of the game, these ribbons will basically be turned in for points. And that's basically it in terms of the gameplay. The expansion adds a board as well as a new type of transparency cards that are basically reversible.
Right.
So it gives you more flexibility. And there's another type of transparency that'll award you these gold ribbons depending on if you're able to meet the adjacent criteria, if that makes sense. It just adds a bit more complexity to the strategy. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so very light game, enjoyable, but it is nothing like too heavy strategy, so it's easy to get into, very, very simple to teach. So it's like one of those games that at the beginning of a game night, simple if you just want to get in 5 players before you break off into like a more heavy kind of deep dive into a different game. This one we've played with kids also. And they enjoyed it, and they got the concepts pretty quick. It is clever. I always like in games where you have a finite amount of tokens and like you see an ideal card that is about 4 cards away. And so you have to kind of do that Moncala thing where you drop off your currency just to pick up that ideal card because you don't think it's going to survive to come back around to you. Also, the positioning of the transparency, some of the cards, the public objectives, you can accidentally overlay. So there is kind of a little bit of a heady thing where it's like, okay, I have this blue, a red, and a yellow. And then when you start to put them in, you're like, oh no, that blue covers up that yellow. Like I need that. So you still have to kind of manage and kind of time everything just right so you can put those perfect paintings together.
Right. It is very, very simple, very, very light, but still with enough strategy that it definitely gets your brain going. But the pull is at the end of the game what everybody's pictures look like. Like that for me is where the game shines.
Yeah, the art is very, very nice in this game.
But for me personally, it is a little bit too light. It is something that I'd like to bring to like family gatherings for people who don't necessarily play a whole lot of games, who just want that like pleasant gameplay with some competition and then that like end of game reveal kind of thing. But for the two of us to play together, a little bit too light.
Yeah, I don't think we'd be pulling it out just for the two of us. Families and friends during the holidays, absolutely.
And that's about it. That is Canvas, as well as its expansion, Canvas Reflections. If you'd played this game before, we would love to hear your thoughts. Please let us know in the comments below.
Okay, the next game we're going to talk about is a 3 or 4 player only game, and it's a trick-taking game, which is called Aurum. Now, Aurum is one of those games where it's 3 players, it's everybody for themselves, and 4 players, it's 2v2.
Right.
And it's unique because in most trick-taking games, you have to follow the leader whenever they play a certain suit. In this particular game, you are not allowed to follow the leader.
That's right. And by the way, the theme of this game, if you're wondering, is everybody is an alchemist, and we are trying to convert base metals into gold.
Makes sense.
So the gold aspect is actually very important
It is,
in terms of the gameplay. The way that this game works is it's one of those trick-taking games where you have to bid on how many tricks you think you're going to win.
You have to declare.
You have to declare before you start the round. And I don't know about you, but for me, that's always trouble.
Yeah.
And so you're doing this with one of the cards in your hand. And now that card that you play in front of you to determine how many tricks you think you're going to win is now no longer going to be in play for you. You also have to choose from one of the cards that you have in your hand. So sometimes that might be a very high value or a very low one. But basically, when the round starts, whoever leads the trick is going to play a card. And everybody else who follows cannot play a card of the same suit.
Right.
At the end of the trick, it's going to be whoever plays the highest valued card the most recently wins the trick. Whoever lost the trick gets to take a gold card from the display area that matches the value of the card that they played. So if I played a 3 and I happened to play the lowest value and I completely lost that trick.
Yeah, you're an absolute loser. You played the lowest value of all
of everybody. Then I can take the value 3 gold card if it's still available. And the gold cards are going to be worth a certain number of points at the end of the game. There are symbols on the cards that sort of tell you how much they're worth. But that is another strategy to do well in this game. You don't always necessarily need to win the tricks. You can sort of just purposely lose so that you can convert your loss into points.
Yeah, and these gold cards, not only do they act as points at the end of the game, but they're also trump suits. So if you, let's say at the very beginning, you thought you were going to win a bunch of tricks and you find yourself halfway through and you're like, I still need to win 4 more tricks. At least you have these trumps that you have now kind of gained by losing to then try to go and win tricks. There is also an element in this game where you can spend one of your gold cards in order to switch out what you declare, how many wins you're going to get.
Yeah.
So if at the very beginning I'm like, okay, I'm going to put a 6, I'm going to win 6, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm only going to win 3. You have a moment where you can kind of switch your bid and then maybe put out something that is more feasible or more reasonable for you.
Yeah, and this is advantageous because at the end of the round, if you're able to meet your bid, then you'll score that many points. But if you meet it exactly, then I believe it's times 2.
2x, yeah.
So you really want to try to figure out how to score the most points with a combination of taking gold cards and really trying to hit your bid exactly. Now, the thing about this game is you never know when a round is going to end.
Right.
Because the round ends when basically somebody cannot play a card because they cannot not follow suit, if that makes sense. You have to always play a card that's not the same suit.
Yeah, so if like your hand is just full of green and somebody played a green and you're like, well, I don't have anything other than green, then unfortunately you're out.
If you either don't have or you don't want to play one of your gold cards.
Yes, you're not mandated to play a trump suit. So if you want to end the round, you could just say, no, I will not be playing this trump suit.
And that'll ruin some people's plans who are sort of counting on more time in order to win the correct amount of tricks, basically. So that's about it. I have not been able to play the 4-player game, which I think I would probably prefer because I love games such as Yokai Septet or Court Piece, I think is another game. Basically, any kind of trick-taking game that requires 2 pairs to work together, I think is really fun.
Yeah, I've played this one, the 2v2, and I much prefer it over the 3-player, the everybody for themselves. Most trick-taking games, when it gets to 4 players and it's 2v2, I prefer over everybody for themselves. In a 2v2, there is no communication with your partner. So at the very beginning, when you're going to declare how many tricks you think you're going to win as a team, everybody just basically turns up a card face up, and whoever is the higher value exposed, that is the amount that you are as a team now are going to try to win. So if I put up 6 and you put up a 2, then it's like, uh-oh, we got to figure out a way that we're going to win 6 because I put out that 6.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I definitely want to play it at 4. I just haven't had the chance to. But I really enjoyed it at 3.
Yeah.
I think it's really clever. The fact that you can't play the same suit, it's sort of unwinding your brain in that sense for anybody who really enjoys trick taking. But I think the addition of the gold cards and the ability to also win gold cards makes it so that you either want to be the best or you want to be the worst. But it leaves both options open for you. And I really like that part of the game.
Yeah, I've had fun with it. I think that I do have a little bit of difficulty, I will say, with some of the suits. There are symbols on there which you can kind of clarify. Some of the blues and the grays kind of get a little bit messy for me, but overall, experience-wise, we really enjoy trick-taking games,
Yeah,
and so
love trick-taking games.
this one's another one to add to the pile.
There you go.
Yeah.
See, it is a bit unique.
A little unique,
These
yeah.
games all have something unique
Yeah.
about them. But anyway, that
go.
is Aurum.
Aurum.
Moving on to the next game, we have a fully cooperative campaign-style game, which we haven't played one of those in a while.
A long time,
right? But this one we were able to play several times, and it is called Race to the Raft.
Uh-huh.
So, if you're familiar with a game called Isle of Cats, this is a game that came out several years ago. I believe we made a video for it.
We did a playthrough of it.
Yeah.
Don't know
several
how
years
good
ago.
the camera work was for that one, but
I really enjoyed that one.
stepping stone. Yeah, that's a good game.
Anyway, this is by the same publisher and also sort of follows the same theme-ish. It's in the same world. These are the same cats. They've been saved from the island,
They gotta
and
get
now
off.
a catastrophe has happened. And in this game, wherever they are, it's burning down, unfortunately.
There's a wildfire.
And so we are trying to cooperatively save these cats by laying cards out of their preferred terrain type, because for some reason, each cat can only go via a certain terrain type and lead them to this raft before
Chaos.
something bad
Yes,
happens.
for bad things.
And that is honestly the basic gist of what this game is all about. This is a campaign style game. So if you enjoy the game, there are a ton of scenarios that come with the game and that I believe that you can find online. And the whole premise of it is you create a board depending on what scenario you're playing. It tells you exactly how to lay them out, but the boards are double-sided, and so it sort of randomizes the different types of terrain, just the way that the boards are laid out. And the game comes with 4 different decks of cards. Now, on the back of each deck, it tells you the distribution of the terrain types that are found in the deck. And
The rough distribution. It's not.
It's very rough.
It's not an exact science. It's
No, definitely not. And we've only played this at 2. So in a 2-player game, each player draws 3 cards, and you can choose freely from the decks where you want to draw from. And each round, you're basically trying to play out all of your cards. Now, you can decide who takes what turn and when. It's very free-flowing in that sense. But there are only 2 main things that you can do. And it's basically playing out a card onto the actual board so that it overlays terrain
onto the island.
onto the island, so that you're creating a path from each of these cats to the raft. And like I was mentioning earlier, each cat can only go across a certain terrain type.
Right. So the blue cat can only go across the blue, the green across the green, and so on and so forth.
Right. And after you play out your card, then you have to draw these fire tiles, these humongous fire tiles from a bag. And you have to place it onto the board.
Yeah, these are polyomino tiles.
They are. And they are very, very terrible shapes.
Strange shapes,
For what
yeah.
you need to do. And you basically have to place them so that they're adjacent to where there already is fire. You cannot cut off the path for cats, and basically you can't overlay the raft, you can't overlay a cat, or else you'll immediately lose.
Yep.
And so you kind of get the gist. If you can't get all these cats to the raft safely, then you will lose the game.
Right.
Another thing that you can do is you can just discard a card in order to move a cat as far as you'd like across its specific terrain type. And after you do that, it becomes inactive for that round. So if another player would like to do that again in the same round, they now have to spend 2 cards. Now, after you get past these tutorial scenarios, there are also communication tokens that you have a certain number of to be spread out throughout the group. And the reason why is because as soon as a player starts taking a turn, nobody can talk to them. Which means when you're placing out the fire tiles, nobody can give you advice. You can potentially be placing out cards in areas that completely ruin somebody else's plans. And so there are 2 types of communication tokens. One that if you discard it, now only you, the person who discarded the token can speak freely with whoever the active player is. And as soon as those tokens run out, then you have these cat tokens where if you discard it, now you can meow freely.
So you're not truly communicating
whoever.
what it is, but maybe
Right.
you're communicating something's wrong by meowing at them.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Meow, meow. There are just lots of different iterations of that. There are also more challenging scenarios for people who really enjoy this puzzle and want to get more difficult or more advanced with it. But there you go. So what are your thoughts, Naveen?
I think I like this thing better than you do. I like cooperative games and I like puzzly games. So this one is kind of a puzzle where it's ever changing as you play. So as I play a card, it might not have been the most ideal one based off of the cards that are in your hand. But like if I play this blue, I'm like, oh, clearly I have stuff to kind of get this blue cat moving forward. Because whenever you play, you have to pull out those fire polyominoes. So the goal is essentially trying to get the cats out of the way, and wherever their starting block was, let that area burn. So I'm just trying to constantly like puzzle out like, okay, with the cards I've drawn, how do I get as far as possible and not end the game for us by kind of blocking off a cat? So I like that puzzle. I personally enjoy it, and I like working together kind of in like a tense-like environment, knowing that there are dire consequences for these cats if we don't get them off the raft.
I can see that.
Yeah.
The thing that I found unique about the game was the fact that it's just entirely card laying. It's card laying, and it's this campaign where you just basically do the same puzzle, but so many different iterations of it. I don't know. I felt like it was pretty unique in the theme as well, even though the theme is quite morbid. The thing about the game for me, though, is I really like card laying. So some examples of this are like Honshu. Honshu is a game that I really, really like. Its successor, Hokkaido, is another one, but now I'm blanking on other titles that do the card laying, but there are other games like this, and I typically enjoy that puzzle. Now, I don't know if I like it as just basically the only mechanism, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I do think that it's a very interesting puzzle. It is quite a puzzle. Like, that is the root of the game. You're just trying to strategically figure out the order in which you move the cats. There's a lot of strategy that you're thinking about while you're playing.
It does have one of those like slide puzzle kind of feels to it, where it's like, well, if I get the green cat out of the way, then that means I can now get the blue cat to go, and then we can just let that entire north
Yeah,
burn.
you can start placing the fire where the
cats used to
green
be.
cat left. Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of strategy in terms of that. And there are also certain scenarios that will require you to say, you have to get the blue cat to the raft first before the orange cat. And maybe the blue cat is like the least ideal one to move first. So it is very challenging. The game is actually quite hard. And there are also these water droplets, to be fair, that you can spend in order to remove a previous fire tile that was placed. It'll just decrease the amount of points that you score over the course of the entire campaign.
Right.
But the thing about the game for me is, first of all, the look of the board as you're placing out fire. It's really scary. I just look at it and God, like there's just so much fire.
So
it doesn't
they evoked the emotion.
I don't feel good when I'm playing it. And like the game is such a quiet, like strategic. It's not like we're like laughing and enjoying and having fun during it. And I think part of it is because of the way that the communication works. We can't strategize. And that's what I really enjoy about playing co-ops. We can strategize about like, I'll go next because I have a really good yellow card. Like that's pretty much the extent of the strategy.
Communication, yeah.
And then when I'm playing with certain players who are like really strategic when it comes to co-op games, I feel this scrutiny when I'm playing the fire tiles.
It's because the fire tiles are these like oblong shaped like polyominoes, and so sometimes it's like, okay, rotate it 90 and then invert it, and then it'll be the perfect shape for that area. And you're probably holding it like horizontal, like, oh, I guess I'm gonna have to do this.
Sometimes you don't see it. Sometimes you don't see the perfect fit, and I just feel the disappointment from my teammates. Like, you shouldn't have. Now I can't play my card, you know. But that's about it. That is the extent of it. This is just a game that really wasn't for me. I enjoyed Isle of Cats quite a bit, but this is just a very, very different game. So if you enjoy Isle of Cats, it's not going to give you any information as to whether or not you'll like this one.
Yeah.
But if you do enjoy this puzzle, there is so much content that comes with the game. So there you go. That is Race to the Raft. All right, moving on to the final game that we'll be talking about today. This is one that was highly anticipated by the both of us, I think. Last year, right before Essenspiel.
Right.
And we didn't get to play it until this year.
It is called Tribes of the Wind.
Yes, this is a 2 to 5 player game where the theme of it is, I believe we are building forests, we're building villages, and we're trying to combat pollution.
Right.
So it sort of reminds me of that movie, the Studio Ghibli movie called Nausicaa. If you're familiar with it, it gives me those sort of vibes. But basically, in this game, the thing that makes it unique is there's a deck of cards in the game, and they represent different elements. One side of the card has actions that you can take, and the other side just shows what element it's from. And so each player is going to have their own stand that you place your 5-card hand on so that everybody else can only see the back of your cards. The reason why that's important is because on your turn, one of the main actions that you can take is playing out one of your cards. And a lot of these cards have benefits that depend on what elements your opponents have, the ones that are seated to your left and your right.
Yeah, because it could be something like the active card that you're playing could say, have the least amount of water amongst the people to your left and right. So if you know you have no water elements, you're like, this is the perfect time for me to play it.
Yeah.
Because maybe Monique has some and then Michael has some over there.
Right.
Or it could be something like get the benefit of the total amount of water that's in play. It's like, oh, great, everybody has a bunch of water. Now it's my time to play this card.
Yes. And the strength of the action will also be dependent on how many of your neighbors you're doing better than, I guess. Yep. So if I have fewer green cards than Naveen, but I have more than Michael, then I'm going to get the lesser benefit between the two. So it's a game all about timing. You're strategizing between which elements to take, because also the different types of element cards pertain to the different types of actions that you can take, such as gaining more water, which you'll need in order to build forests, or moving around your wind riders, which you'll need in order to turn your forest into villages.
So you're kind of invested in what your opponents are taking, because if I see that Monique is hoarding a bunch of fire and this card in my hand wants me to have fire, maybe I'll discard this card, because there's another action that allows you to discard 3 cards so that you can build out a temple, which is one of the scoring parameters in the game.
Yes, and so that is the main sort of element to the game, the card play. In addition to that, each player has their own board, and like I was mentioning, we're going to be building out these forest tiles onto our board and turning some of them into villages. So each player starts the game with a village card, and that tells you sort of a goal to work towards, because if you're able to meet it, then at the end of the game, you'll score a certain number of points. And these goals are usually some sort of arrangement on your player board where you place your temples and where you place your villages. Right. So it's very puzzly in that sense.
Yeah, like mine in the most recent play was have 3 of the same type of terrain in the same row on my board.
Now each forest tile shows a certain number of circles, and that is where you need to place wind riders, which are your yellow pieces, I guess, in order to convert a forest into a village, which is another type of action that you can take on your turn. So there are going to be cards that allow you to move your wind riders around the board, and so that is another part of the strategy, sort of divvying out where your wind riders go and which forests you take, because each forest tile shows anywhere between 1 and 3 bonuses, and these bonuses are going to be things like creating a teleportation device, so now you can teleport between these tiles that have the symbol, or if you convert this forest into a village, it does not create pollution, because otherwise it would, and pollution is going to score you a certain number of points at the end of the game, depending on how much of it you've been able to clear off.
Any tile or any area that has pollution, you're not even allowed to build on. So part of the biggest mechanism of the game, or one of the biggest things you need to do, is clear off pollution off your board so that you can actually build out those forest tiles and eventually get those villages on them.
And each player has an asymmetric board and guide cards, so that each time you meet your guide criteria, which is listed on your player board, then you can put one of your guide cards into play, up to a maximum of 2 for the entire game. And these are really strong. It's sort of the asymmetric ability aspect of the game.
Yeah, they kind of give you a unique thing that you can do. So it might be every time you play a fire card, you get to do this particular benefit, or once per turn, you can turn 1 water in for to clean up 1 pollution, things like that.
And at the end of the game, you'll score points for a lot of different things, including the end goal objectives that you acquired. You'll score points depending on how many villages, how many temples you built, and how much pollution you were able to clear off. So what are your thoughts on Tribes of the Wind now that we've finally been able to play
this one we wanted to play for a long time, like we were mentioning. I really like it. I think it was pretty fun. I think playing it at 3 players is kind of the sweet spot for me, because you're only really truly invested in your neighbor to your left, your neighbor to your right. So even though it plays 5 players, I kind of just want to get back to my turn. You know, it's one of those games where it's like, okay, like we're both kind of keeping eyes on each other. Or all 3 of us are keeping eyes on each other, and it's just faster to kind of go around the table. There's a lot of little things that you can do in this game. Managing kind of your hand is a really fun part for me, where I'm like, if I could just get one more water, then I can get the better benefit at the bottom here.
Right.
So, oh no, there's no water because Monique took the last water that was in the display. So like, am I gonna just
Switch
hang
gears.
on and like just like wait another whole round to try to get this, or should I just exactly switch gears and do something else? So there's like a lot of little micro decisions there, but it's not like a real heady game or anything like that. So it's easy to get into, easy to understand, but also enough game there for me.
Yeah, I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
I thought that it was very, very puzzly. And that is sort of the sweet spot for me, I guess, in terms of games like this. It also plays not that long. It
Yeah.
says 20 minutes per player, and it feels about right.
About right,
Depending
yeah,
on who
maybe,
you're
yeah.
playing with, I guess.
Sure.
There can be some pretty paralyzing decision making sometimes,
yeah.
depending on what cards people drew, especially if the person right before you maybe didn't draw the card that you needed, or they spent the cards that you're relying on them having,
Yes,
so
it's
that you
like,
could play the card that you wanted to
you
play.
needed me to have 3 green, but
Yeah.
then on my turn I spent 2 of those, and it's like,
Yes.
oh, now I can
Ruined
have to
my
Yeah,
plans.
you have to think about it again. Yeah.
Yeah, so that can take a little bit of time in terms of the turn flow,
Mm-hmm.
and also maybe about halfway through the game. I don't know about you, but for me, every time we play it feels like it gets pretty quiet. Maybe because like people start getting really invested in their strategy and trying to form the right combinations, because there is a lot of puzzly aspects to the game that we didn't even get to touch upon. Like there are goals that require you to have certain colors of forests in a certain pattern on your board, or you want to get a temple on this tile and another one on this tile, but you can only build out forests sort of adjacent to ones that are already on your board.
And non-polluted. It's a nice weight game for me. I personally really, really enjoy this one. I think this one's going to stay in the collection.
Yeah, I really liked it too. I just think that it hits a lot of the sweet spots for me in terms of timing, weight, as well as the mechanisms and the player interaction. So
In a 2-player game, if you're curious, with the whole neighboring bonus, the display basically adds like the third neighbor that you would typically have. So if anybody's curious of how it plays at 2, that's basically the only difference.
we have not played it at 2,
Yeah, we
so we
haven't,
cannot
yeah.
speak on it. But there you go. That is Tribes of the Wind,
yeah.
the final game for today.
Well, thank you all so much for watching the video. We hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, please consider subscribing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.